Take your seats, everyone.
Where do we take them?
We'll take them to your farm, and we'll visit the cows. All 30 of them. 30?
40.
40? Wow.
We got 5 babies right now.
5 baby cows.
5 more coming.
Wow. That's amazing.
AOC is going to outlaw them.
Huh?
AOC is going to outlaw them.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, here we are. Thank you all for coming, everyone. My name is Peter Falkenberg Brown. I'm the chairman of the Gray Republican Committee, and we are honored to have everyone here tonight to discuss the crisis of immigration at the Mexican border. We'll have 3, possibly 4 sections of this program. The first will be a short talk from myself, followed by Jack Wibby, our secretary, presenting an open letter, which is going to be very interesting to all of you if you haven't heard it. And then our main keynote will be around 7 o'clock from Robert Casimiro on the main topic of the immigration crisis at the southern border. He has personal testimony based on his many visits there. And then around 7:30, we'll have questions and answers and discussion and see how that goes. And possibly around 10 of 8 or 8, depending on how the Q&A goes, we're hoping that the candidate for District 45 for the House of Representatives, Casey Hughes, will show up if he can get here. Not sure 100%, but if he can, he'll come and give a few minutes of remarks just about his candidacy, which will be on June 11th. So if you haven't marked your calendar yet, you should mark it for June 11th to go vote for the Republican candidate for House of Representatives, Casey Hughes. And that's an important date. So if you haven't had if you don't have a flyer, there's some extra flyers for tonight's event at the table. You can pick up and take home with you as a reference. We also have an email sign-up sheet. So if you're not on our email list, we invite you to sign up with your email, and then you can keep informed of what we're doing. And we also have monthly meetings, the 4th Wednesday of every month, usually right here in this room, from 6:30 to 8. Sometimes it changes the date, so you can always check our website, which is grayrepublicans.org, and find out all about our meetings and whatever else is going on. And we try to put some essays and articles of note and news items of interest to conservatives on that website. So if you go there, you might be interested in a few of the things there. Let's see. I think that's all the announcement kind of things. Anybody else from our committee have anything that they need to add to that? Of newsy things? Maybe not. So, well, the topic of immigration at the southern border is a vital one. It is a crisis. My introductory talk to that topic is not focused on what's happening there physically, which Bob will talk about. I'm going to focus on what I would say there's a larger issue of American sovereignty and American exceptionalism. But it is a crisis. There's definitely a crisis there. Kirstjen Nielsen, the former Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, said in March of this year, "We have a system-wide meltdown. We are witnessing the real-time dissolution of the immigration system." And that's a frightening thought. It's a crisis that I think has been shaped partly because of the conflict of 2 opposing worldviews. One worldview is the standard traditional American worldview that holds individual rights as sacred and sovereign and believes in the sovereignty of the country, where all the individuals in the country and the country as a whole has the sovereign right to manage their own affairs. And I think that's very normal for most of us. We believe we have those individual rights. We grew up with them. But there is an opposing worldview presented by the left, a worldview that I might describe as something they present as a compassionate, utopian worldview of a world where borders are not necessary everyone is taken care of by a benevolent government. And it sounds very good. So it's very appealing to people who are in poverty, who are in dire straits. The government will take care of you. People that have young children now, or millennial children that aren't making enough money, are trying to live on a minimum wage. It sounds very, very attractive to have the government take care of you. But the problem with the leftist worldview is that even though they talk about taking care of the individual, the distinct difference between their view and the conservative traditional American view is that they don't give the individual rights. You have some rights, but not the rights that we enjoy through our system of government. The worldview of globalism or compassion and having the government take care of you, and the worldview of open borders where we should just invite everyone in because everyone has a right to be taken care of. Even the Pope recently said that we should just welcome more and more immigrants. Well, if you want to love people, it sounds very, very normal to do that. And the left is pushing this agenda very hard. In January of this year, Farhad Manjoo wrote in the New York Times, "Imagine moving from Nigeria to Nebraska as freely as one might move from Massachusetts to Maine." Just imagine that for a moment, where you can just move into America and out of America as if it was just another state. Well, it sounds good if you think about compassion and love and kindness. But there's a problem with it, and one of the problems with it is that if the world was a world where every individual in it was a saint, or even if every individual in it lived according to the traditional American style of living and respected the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, well, maybe it would work. But the world is not like that. There are many, many dreadful and violent people in the world. And if we remove our borders completely and have open borders with no restrictions, it would have a very bad effect. We have to be careful about who we invite into our homes, who we invite into our country. So let's think about that for a minute. Traditionally, in free countries, it's been kind of a truism that individuals they have the right to decide who comes into their house, who comes into their living room, their bedroom, their bathroom, and camps out. How many of you all here think that you all have the right to decide who comes into your house, that you have the right to lock your door if you want to? Raise your hand if you agree with that. Everybody agrees with that, right? That's normal. But not everybody in the world agrees with that, and people on the left don't necessarily agree with that. Nancy Pelosi has declared that walls are immoral. And many people on the left are I don't think she has a wall around her house, but I'm sure she locks her door.
She does.
So the question then is, would people who disagree with that concept, that we have the right to decide who comes into our house, would they like it if hundreds of us showed up and camped out in their living room? There's an activist named Laura Loomer, a conservative activist, who actually, barged onto Nancy Pelosi's yard and kind of camped out for a bit, and she was removed by the police, probably at Nancy Pelosi's request. So there's a tremendous amount of hypocrisy going on in the left when they say we have to be compassionate and open our borders for all, but they keep their doors locked. So if we look at the difference then of individual rights, the conservative right is very strong about individual rights. The left talks compassion but is not strong about individual rights. The communists talked about taking care of the workers. The evil, industrialists are oppressing the workers. Today in America, on the left, everything is a narrative of oppressor versus oppressed. So we have to help the oppressed. We have to get rid of the oppressors. The problem is that when they get rid of the oppressors, they start to eat their own. They don't actually honor the individual. Even now in the arguments with political correctness on the left, they have arguments about feminism and gender issues and transgender issues. And the tennis player, Martina Navratilova, who's a lesbian, came out against trans women in sports. She thought it was terribly unfair where men decide that they're women and go compete in sports against biological women and, beat the crap out of them, wrestling or weight. I just saw a video the other day, a man identifying as a woman won some contests doing weightlifting. Well, duh. So, of course he did. But Martina Navratilova, who's a leftist lesbian, was trashed and compared to, and she was called a Nazi because she thought it was unfair for a man who identifies as a woman to compete in women's sports. So the left talks compassion, open borders, but they don't actually take care of every individual. They don't give every individual the rights to do what they want. You have rights as long as you toe the line, as long as you agree with the party line. So if we look at the countries around the world that are not free, like North Korea, China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, if we look at countries in history that have not been free, really, I think that you might say that the general standard of life throughout all of human history was that people were not free. Individuals were not free. They were oppressed by one form of empire or totalitarianism or dictatorship or another. The Roman Empire, the Islamic empires. It's been a terrible history of oppressing individuals until one day in 1776, a bunch of relatively young men got together, many in their 20s and 30s, some in their 40s, some older like Benjamin Franklin. But Thomas Jefferson was only 33 when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. And it was an amazing event that happened there because the world had not been free. The countries around the world had not had freedoms defined until the Founding Fathers defined them. And I know we all know this sentence, but I'm going to read it anyway because I believe this sentence defines America and defines a standard of freedom that we need to cling to and adhere to and never forget. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Endowed by their Creator, not from government, from God, from a source that no one can argue with or interfere with. Sacred, unalienable rights that every human being has. Now, in the left, in America, people tend to trash America, trash the Founding Fathers. Well, America was founded on racism and slavery and bigotry and misogyny, and Jefferson had slaves and Washington had slaves, and it's terrible, and there's nothing to be proud of. America was never great. A lot of leftist leaders are saying that now. But think about where America stood in the long stream of thousands of years of human history. 5,000 years of recorded history, where slavery was endemic everywhere, where human life was cheap. To live a long life was a miracle. If you didn't die from disease, you died from getting your head chopped off or impaled. I'm part Swedish. I thought, oh, that's not bad, but think about the Vikings. They were horrible, but everybody else was horrible too, almost. So it wasn't a good world. So when these men in 1776 put together the Declaration of Independence and then just a few years later created the Constitution with the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, this was an incredible watershed event in human history. They weren't perfect. The southern states still had slaves. It was a compromise to create a union of 13 colonies, but compared to what had gone before, it was amazing. And then, because it wasn't perfect, 75 years later, at the end of the Civil War in 1865, over 360,000 Union soldiers had died to free the slaves, including 40,000 black Union soldiers who fought along with them. This was an incredible, marvelous, noble sacrifice. Most of the white Union soldiers had never owned a slave. Many of them had probably never seen a slave. How could they? But they got up, they went out, and they sacrificed themselves for the sake of those African Americans who were in slavery. We can't ever let that sacrifice be swept under the rug by leftist apologists who just say, oh, America's racist. That was not a racist act to die to free the slaves. And yes, after Lincoln was shot, the restoration of the South didn't go well. It took another 100 years until the 1960s for true, total civil rights to come to all races. But in the 1960s, with Martin Luther King, etc., full racial human rights came to all races in America. By that time, full rights had been granted to women. So finally, in the 2000s, America could elect a black president, not once, but twice. This is not a racist act. America is not a racist country because we elected a black president. And now in 2019, women are running for president. A black woman is running for president, Kamala Harris, and no one cares. No one cares about their race. No one cares about their gender unless it's to admire them. But America has come an incredible distance from 1776 until now. I think it's safe to say that America has matured, and really young 33-year-old Thomas Jefferson's words have flowered now. Now when millennials are running around saying America's a racist country and Black Lives Matter is saying that America's a racist country, it's a lie. There is no institutional racism. There's no, yes, there are still racists, a few running around, but not that many. And as a country, we are incredible and we are exceptional. So my topics tonight are American sovereignty and American exceptionalism. We are indeed an exceptional country, and we are a sovereign country, and we have to protect that. If we open our borders to unfettered, unrestricted immigration, waves of immigrants will come in. Not like the legal immigrants who came in over the last 250 years. We're proud of immigrants. We're all from immigrants. E pluribus unum, out of many one. Immigrants came gratefully, respectfully. They learned our history, they learned our language, they learned our culture, they learned about the Constitution, they took their citizenship tests, and they said from almost every country in the world, finally, I'm an American. I'm proud to be an American. And they contributed. However, even though immigration has helped make America great, unfettered, unrestricted immigration will destroy America's sovereignty and destroy America's exceptionalism, because millions upon millions of immigrants would come in who didn't have to study our history, didn't have to study our language, didn't have to learn about the Constitution, and wouldn't contribute to it. It wouldn't come with love and respect and gratitude for the principles that make America free. And that would be a dreadful thing. Those immigrants, those millions and millions and millions of immigrants coming in through an open borders immigration system, would receive tons of free stuff from the party that wants to give them free stuff. And you know which party I'm talking about, right? Not the Republican Party. The one begins with D. They would receive all that free stuff, and they would give their votes to that party. Because they gave their votes to that party, the demographics of voting in America would be completely changed. And it wouldn't be changed for the better. I believe that if open borders immigration happens and continues so that America is flooded with illegal aliens and immigrants who don't care about America, 10, 15, 20 years from now, the Democrat Party will use those votes to radically alter America. They'll alter the Constitution, they'll alter the Bill of Rights. Pretty soon we could easily see that America could become socialist, and then America could become totalitarian. And finally, with a totalitarian socialist country in place, fast forward another 10 or 15 or 20 years, it would be just like Venezuela. Everyone would be flat broke, poverty everywhere, and millions of people would want to leave, as they're doing from Venezuela right now. Rachel Campos Duffy wrote for Fox News in January of 2018 about a Venezuelan immigrant who came to America and was at a meeting, and he stood up and he had an American flag in one hand and a Venezuelan flag in the other. And he said, "We need to educate our children to be wary of those who promise us free things. I don't care if it's a bag of rice or a washing machine. Nothing is worth your freedom. It's priceless." They've seen it happen in Venezuela. It used to be one of the richest countries in South America, and now it's the poorest. We don't want that to happen to America. We need to, for the sake of the founding fathers, for the sake of the hundreds of thousands of people that have died to make America free, for the sake of millions of people around the world who are not in freedom now and want to come to America and be free legally, respectfully, and gratefully, for the sake of freedom, we need to defend the American sovereignty and American exceptionalism. We need to make sure that America does not perish as a free country of sacred individualism. Therefore, in my opinion, we have to thoroughly oppose any concept of open immigration at the border. So, amen to that. Thank you very much.